All right, thanks for joining us. Zach, thank you for joining us.
No problem.
Zach is an in-person coach who also works for ATG Online, has been for many years. He's got a background in board sports. So sometimes for these level 3 videos, we do podcasts. In other cases, I've never made a video on board sports. I've never done any board sports. So if someone out there does board sports, or you're a coach who coaches someone in board sports, this might save you some years of experience. So I'm going to pass it over to him.
Sweet. All right. So just as Ben mentioned, more of my background is in board sports. And a lot of people, they hop into ATG, they still kind of think it's more of like for basketball or like more traditional style sports. But I'm just going to go through a quick video on kind of connecting the dots of how this stuff might translate into something like snowboarding, wakeboarding, etc. So first off, just like any other ATG workout, we're starting with the sled work. So when you're talking about pushing a sled, obviously we're talking about strengthening things from the ground up. So if you're used to snowboarding, a lot of times you end up traversing on a hill like on one side or another for an extended period of time, and you can get a lot of like high tension kind of soreness at the bottom of your foot. So people end up with things like plantar fasciitis, all sorts of foot pains and whatnot. So what happens with the sled is when you're actually pushing the sled, you're working your little intrinsic muscles in between your toes every single step of the way as you're going. So you're stretching and strengthening your feet every single step of the sled. So not to mention, as you go, you start to increase your speed. You get your heart rate kind of pumping up, so then you can kind of not gas yourself out on the hill. So that's one little tidbit. All right, so the next piece, we're going to be working on tibs and calves. So if you've done any kind of snowboarding for a while, obviously you know that the main ways to turn or change direction is heel side turning and toe side turning. So obviously when you're doing that, you need to have strong ankles, strong Achilles, strong lower leg muscles. So you just address these via like classic calf raise. So you can use a wall, hands up against the wall. You're walking your feet back till you feel a little bit of a stretch. Your heels are just barely peeling off the ground. Come up to the top, slowly control your way down, just like how Ben teaches it in the traditional ATG system. But if you think about it, when you're on your toes, like let's say you're traversing on the side of the mountain, you're going to be on your toes for such a long period of time for some trails, especially if you're doing kind of off the beaten path trails, that a lot of times your Achilles just gets set on fire. So not only do you want to be in these kind of lengthened calf raise positions, but also these bent knee calf raises. So right here, when you're bending your knee, you hit more of the deeper calf muscle, aka like your soleus, which also directly attaches to your Achilles. And your Achilles, more times than not, when you're snowboarding, is the thing that catches on fire when you're traversing across the mountain. So you just get into this bent knee position. Again, same thing you did with that kind of more extended position. Up at the top, controlled. Slowly get down, up, down. There's ways to scale these things down, ways to scale these things up, but just want to touch on that. And so you did your calves, so now we're doing the tibs. So the calves address the back side. Tibs are obviously addressing the front side, and this is more like you're going to do some more heel side turning, toe side turning, so it just kind of affects both sides of the ankle. So tib raise, classic. If you've been following ATG for any period of time, you know what we're doing here. So butt up against the wall, leaning forward, bring your toes to your nose, and then slowly control it down. If it's easy here, you just walk your feet out. If it's harder, you just walk your feet closer to the wall. And you just kind of come down, up, nice and controlled. You're not trying to slap your feet on the ground, but nice and controlled. Down, and then up, down, and then up. If you have a tib bar, you can kind of use a little bit more of leverage to get a little bit more range of motion in your ankle, which might be favorable, but just something super simple, super easy to access for any kind of training. You can just hop into it like that. So the next one is the classic ATG split squat. So the split squat is one of my favorite exercises just because it allows for you to get that full bend, that full range in your knee without kind of the limiting factor of, like, let's say if you're trying to do a full squat, full range of motion, get your hamstring to your calf, like on a full squat, it's much harder to get into this position for a lot of people straight off the bat. So a very easy way to scale it is just do it unilaterally. So obviously you don't need to start on the ground, but here we are starting on the ground. You're getting that full flexion in the knee. You're getting a fairly deep flexion point in your front leg at the hip, but also in that back leg, you're opening up your hip flexor. And your hip flexors, when you're riding, whether it's going over whatever kind of terrain, a lot of times those things get set on fire. Not to mention why you're wanting to kind of more train through a full range of motion is, like, let's say when you're going down, Think about like hitting terrain parks or jumps or dropping off of cliffs on a snowboard, or even just hitting some unknown whoops, moguls, whatever it may be. All of a sudden your body needs to hop into these like kind of much deeper range positions at just like a moment's notice. And one of my old mentors used to say is new range is weak range. So if you're not actually training through these full ranges of motion, where you're teaching your body it's okay to actually be into these deeper ranges, whether it's knee flexion, hip flexion, whatever. If you find yourself all of a sudden in a splits notice having to kind of reach into your body's full capacity to absorb shock, if you're getting to a position where you're here but your body needs to go down deeper, all of a sudden that new range becomes super unfamiliar. Things get a little bit wonky, and then all of a sudden that's where injuries happen. So if you take yourself through something like a split squat, it's a nice, easy way for you to scale a way for your body to start to get used to being in these deeper positions on both sides. Also, like with your knees and hip flexors, you're hitting your hips, knees range of motion, but not to mention you're also working your toes and ankles a little bit as well. All right, so the next one I want to throw at you is just a VMO squat. So it's essentially just a squat when you're up, heels elevated up on a slant board. So this one I like because, well, once your hips and everything are able to go full range of motion without pain, including like your knees are able to go full range of motion without pain, if you start doing VMO squats, you can start to add a little bit more load and more intention behind what you're doing here. So you want to control yourself going down and then back up. And the reason why you want to do these, again, it goes back to what I mentioned doing the split squats, whereas like sometimes life, and especially when you're on the mountain, like riding a kind of unstable, unknowable surface, like especially if you're in a whiteout and all of a sudden you drop off a cliff and your body needs to absorb as much shock as possible. If you're not training through these full ranges of motion, this kind of past 90 degree or whatever position you want to call it becomes very uncomfortable for your body to deal with. And sometimes when you're having to absorb a excessive amount of impact, your body needs to use as most of its mechanics as possible to absorb it, to protect itself. And so you don't want it to be unfamiliar territory. So this is the way that you can train that. So again, VMO squat, full range of motion, going all the way down, all the way up. Obviously, you can do it with a barbell on your back. I'm doing it with a dumbbell, just kind of goblet squat style. But you can do VMO squats however you want. So another really epic exercise that you can do to kind of bulletproof yourself, or at least prepare properly for kind of taking on the mountain on a snowboard, is going through back extensions. Because no matter what exercise you do or activity you do, it involves a heck of a lot of lower back strength, and snowboarding is no exception. So with that being said, you can get yourself into like a back extension 45. You're actually going to be going down and up and down and up, just like, I mean, Ben puts tons of videos about back extensions up there, so this isn't anything new. But way it translates over to snowboarding is like, let's say when you're going down the mountain, obviously there's going to be a lot of crouching, there's going to be a lot of bending, whether it's kind of absorbing shock or going around using your body for turns, whatever it may be. You're going to have to make sure that your lower back is protected in order to kind of handle these things. Not to mention like getting hit by other skiers on the slopes. You always need to make sure that you're prepared for anything. So prepare your lower back. So sticking with the back extension machine, one of the things that we also should hit on when you're talking about protecting yourself for snowboarding or really any athletic activity, but we're talking about snowboarding right now, is the muscles on the side of the back. So like your QL, all this kind of business that helps protect and strengthen your back when it comes to more lateral type motion. And especially if you're talking in the world of snowboarding, you're doing a lot of twisting and turning as you're going down the mountain, whether it's like just normal carving down the face of the mountain, or like, let's say if you're more of a freestyle rider and you're going in the terrain park and just throwing who knows what kind of spins, flips, whatever, you need to make sure that your trunk is able to withstand that type of force. So, I mean, this may not be anything new, but I'll just demo it just for kicks. So you're just going to be going down on your back extension, feeling a nice stretch. And again, you want to work out whatever your pain-free level is, and then just come back up. So get that stretch in there, and then come back up, stretch, come back up, QL. All right, so we talked about kind of hitting the lower back with the back extension, kind of more on the posterior side of things. Talked about the QL raises, which is kind of more lateral on the side of things. And now this is just your classic kind of hanging ab. I don't even know what you want to call these, like knee raises, where you can just work more on protecting the front side of your lower back, aka abs, hip flexors, whatever you want to however you want to visualize it. So again, this all goes down to protecting your back on all sides for the unknowing and unknowable, which are kind of like pretty much any kind of mountain condition when you're riding. So just something to keep in mind when you're doing these, you're just going up nice and controlled. You can keep tension on it by stopping at like a 90 degree and back up. Keep it control, going down and back up, control back down. You'll start to feel your lower ab muscles start to firing, which is a good thing because, again, we're not only just protecting the back side of your lower back side, but also the front. So another kind of body part that I want to address when it comes to snowboarding and prepping it for riding is your hip. So a lot of times when you're riding, you have these kind of little micro bumps that you're constantly hitting when you're going down the mountain, or even maybe not micro, but like large bumps if you accidentally hit yourself a mogul or something like that. And a lot of people's hips get really jacked up. So one way to kind of help protect your hips is this little guy we call an incline pigeon. You can turn it into like a pigeon push-up. So if you're used to yoga, like this is kind of like the pigeon pose-ish, but elevated up onto a bench. And what it does is it stretches the outer hip muscles here. And then you can start to, and it strengthens it as well because you're actually using the hip to prop yourself up in this position. So it's not just kind of like a weak sauce just hanging here position. It's an active position. And then you can add some more range to it by turning it into almost like a push-up style thing. So you can use your hands, put it on the bench, go down, hit some full range of motion action here, and then come back up. If that's too easy, you can take your hands away, do the same thing. But what you're doing is you're training your body to be strong in these deeper positions in the hip, as well as stretching it. So again, it's protecting your hip through an entire range of motion, because not all the time when you're riding are you just going to be stuck in these kind of partial ranges. You may all of a sudden hit a bump where all of a sudden you need to have access to that entire hip joint. And if your body's not trained and strong in those positions, new range is weak range, as I mentioned earlier in the kind of video. So don't make any range a weak range, including your hip. All right, so obviously snowboarding is a lot more kind of lower body dominant, but there's also things where when you're riding that your upper body needs to be kind of prepped for, whether it's accidental falls or if you're doing like different hand plants or whatever it may be, you should really protect your shoulders. So I'm just gonna go through a few different shoulder exercises just to hit your shoulders at all sorts of different angles. So one of them being the incline press. So just pressing, embrace that full range of motion. Just nice and controlled. Feel the stretch at the bottom. Don't neglect this, because I had really jacked up shoulders from years of wakeboarding, and embracing those deeper ranges of motion really helps get your shoulders nice and healthy. So this is just kind of one angle to hit your shoulders at to protect them with. All right, so another one of my favorite exercises for my shoulders is, it's almost like what a lot of people use for reverse out shoulder pain. Essentially, it's the opposite of the position that we find ourselves in throughout the day. And when we get stronger in this, it'll also protect you again through things like wakeboarding, just because it's hitting your shoulder at a different angle. More times than not, it's an angle that gets neglected throughout like modern living. So it's called a face pull. So you're going to be pulling the cable, whatever attachment you have, to your face. So pulling it to your face, controlling down, pulling to your face, controlling down, face, controlling down. Again, it's essentially just strengthening your shoulders in positions that are the opposite of what we modern day find our shoulders in, which in turn will protect it for riding. All right, so the next one is a trap 3 raise. Again, none of this stuff is new. I'm just kind of helping connect the dots and how this will help in the sport of snowboarding. So trap 3 raise, you can get yourself on a back extension bench, grab some dumbbells. Essentially, you go up, bring your arms up into like a Y position, and then you're slowly controlling down. It's very similar to the face pull, where you're hitting a lot of muscles that get neglected in today's world, are basically just ungluing the positions that we find ourselves in throughout the day. And when you get stronger in those positions, you become more protected. But not to mention, when you're doing the trap 3 raise, you're going up, you're hitting your entire trap. So like everything, your traps is essentially connected from the base of your skull to the tip of your tailbone, essentially. And so it's protecting your back and your shoulders all at the same time. So it's a really kind of good big bang for your buck exercise. So another one, again, this is all hitting the shoulders at all sorts of different angles. And just like the trap 3, that hits not only shoulders, but your back as well. The same thing will be for this pullover. So you're just going to find yourself a bench to lay across, or if you have a sweet little ATG back bench, you can use one of these. It's kind of opening your shoulders up into extension and then bringing it back up. So again, it's just hitting your shoulders. It's all sorts of different angles just because your shoulders are a bit of a wonky joint compared to the rest of your body. So you want to make sure that you're hitting at as many angles and protect it as much as possible, just because you never know what's going to happen. On the slopes, again, snowboarding is more of a lower body demanding exercise or sport, I guess you can call it. But also you need to protect your shoulders at the same time. All right, so a couple of classics just to finish things up. For the arms anyways, are dips and chin. So when you're going into your dips, again, you want to embrace all ranges. So not only just be strong at the top, but strong at the very bottom as well. Just because when you're riding, again, like you never know what you're going to encounter, even if it's when you're falling. Sometimes you end up falling in the not as efficient or mechanically safe positions as possible. So you want to protect your shoulders when you do find yourself in those ranges. So that includes getting yourself into a solid dip at the bottom. You can obviously translate this into push-ups where you're on the ground versus doing dips. But then also when it comes to chin-ups. So embrace the full range here. So full stretch at the bottom, pulling yourself up, controlling down, owning every single inch of the motion. Again, just because you want to have your shoulders strong through every single inch. And if you don't have a chin up, you can use some kind of device to assist you, as well as use some kind of cable pull down, just any kind of position to strengthen your shoulder through those ranges. So to end things off, one thing that when I work with a lot of snowboarders is they deal with a lot of what's it called, whiplash. So whether if you're catching your heel side, toe side, or even if you're just on a rough run, sometimes like your head gets bobbled around so much where your neck gets on some super high tension, and then you're paying for it at the end of the day. So this is a little bit of a neck exercise to just consider throwing into your routine every now and again to just protect your neck from whiplash or even potential concussion cases, because a stronger neck is going to protect your brain. So you can do this by putting your head up onto some bench, get it nice and sturdy, bring your hips up, hold that position for about 5 to 8 seconds, and then you're just gonna go back down, controlled, and then come back up, hold that position, and go back down. There's ways to scale this where you can lean your head just even simply up against the wall, just to get some sort of strength training around your neck to protect yourself. But there you go.
That was incredibly professional. Thank you for doing that. If you're out there, the lowest price to do full programs is online with us. One of Zach's main roles is actually doing calls with you, helping you through it. So we try to give you a ton of care and options for your buck. Thanks for doing that for the members.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this video.
Yeah.
Some of the equipment you see that can help make it user-friendly, that's also linked below. And there might even be an in-person coach or ATG gym near you now. So we'll have all three of those links below: online, equipment, and in-person mat. See you later.
Bye.